Let me ask you a question. What does a milkshake machine salesman, a cartoonist who went bankrupt at 21, an English teacher who was rejected from 30 jobs, and a woman selling face cream out of her kitchen, what do they have in common? Let me tell you that number one, they were built different. That's right. And every one of them built an empire. McDonald's, Disney, Alibaba, and Estee Lauder. Companies worth hundreds of billions of dollars, started by people who, on paper, had no business experience. That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Richard Scrushy. This is Scrushy on Business. Stay tuned. Okay, and we're back. I'm Richard Scrushy. I'm coming to you from Magnolia, Texas. This is Scrushy on Business. We're going to be talking today about entrepreneurship. I've talked about it in the past, but I'm taking a different angle. There's several things I want to talk about, and we're going to talk about 27 of the greatest entrepreneurs over the last 100 years. And we're going to do this over a couple of shows. I don't think I can get it all into one show. And we're going to talk about the different traits. And I opened up with, what does a milkshake machine salesman, a cartoonist who went bankrupt at 21, an English teacher who interviewed for 30-something jobs and was turned down from every one of them, and a woman selling face cream out of her kitchen. What do they have in common? I'll tell you what they have in common. They built billion-dollar companies. That's right. None of them had any business experience. But they had other things that were important. They gave them the ability to build what they built and to build billion-dollar companies, and that's what we're talking about. I wrote a book on it. When building a billion-dollar company, there's a few things you might want to think about. So today, I want to break down the traits that played a role in those individuals being able to build their billion-dollar companies. I spent my life building companies. That's what I've done. I'm a builder. I founded Health South in 1984 with 4 partners. I put in $50,000. I paid the original payrolls. I hired all the people and paid them out of my pocket. And then I was able to go out and raise $1 million in seed capital, venture capital from Citicorp Venture Capital to get the company started. And then over a period of years, I watched it grow into a Fortune 500 company, healthcare company, with facilities in all 50 states and multiple other countries. And today, I'm seeing the same kind of opportunities that I saw back then, the opportunities to build something that nobody else had built, an opportunity to see things that others were not seeing. And so I can tell you this, entrepreneurship, it's not a job title. It's a set of traits. And it's things that you are born with, but many of those you forge when you're going through the fire. So today I want to break down those traits, and we're going to meet 27 over this show and the next one, 27 of the greatest entrepreneurs in the last 100 years who proved those traits out. So this show I'm calling Built Different, because all of these individuals are built different from just people that are not out there trying to do anything great in their lives, or people that don't see the opportunities, that don't dream the dreams and have the visions that these entrepreneurs had. So let's start with vision. That's the first one. Seeing what isn't there yet. Okay, so that's the first trait. The ability to see an opportunity when everyone else sees nothing. Or worse, they see something that already works and they assume that that cannot be improved. Okay, and in many situations, the entrepreneur looks at something that's already kind of working, but he sees a way that he can make it work many, many times better, and a way to build a very large business in doing that. Now, let's just take Henry Ford, for example. Henry Ford, he didn't invent the automobile. A lot of people think he did, but he didn't. He didn't invent it at all. So when he founded Ford Motor Company in 1903, cars were actually hand-built toys for rich people. That was what was happening with cars back in those days. But Ford, he had a different vision. Ford wanted to build cars for everybody. He wanted everybody to be able to have a car. And so he wanted to build for the great multitude, if you will. Now, the Model T arrived in 1908. And then in 1913, that's when Ford invented the assembly line. And a chassis was taken 12 hours to build. And then Ford invented this assembly line, and he was able to bring that down to about 90 minutes to build that same chassis. So it was called the moving assembly line. So it was cutting the time to build that chassis substantially. And he did something the business world also called insane. He doubled the salaries for all of his employees. Yeah, and at the time, I think a doubling was like $5 a day. I mean, it went from like $2.50 a day to $5 a day. But in doubling the salaries, the reason he did that was he wanted his employees to be able to own an automobile that he was manufacturing, because he wanted everybody to have a car. And that was the difference. He didn't invent the automobile, but he did invent the assembly line. And he didn't just build a company. He built what became the America's middle class relationship with the automobile. And so he created a modern manufacturing facility. So he had a vision. He had a different vision. Didn't create the automobile, but he created the process to mass produce them, and he created the concept of building automobiles that could be afforded by the mass population, certainly the middle class. Now, there's another guy who had incredible vision, and that's Ray Kroc. Many of you know the McDonald's story. You watched the movie about Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc was a milkshake salesman, and in 1954, he was out there selling milkshake machines across the country, and he had this one store by the McDonald brothers, and they had bought, I think, something like 8 of his milkshake machines, and so he was curious about that. So he drove to Bernardino, California, to see why this hamburger place was buying 8 of his machines. And what he saw when he got there and he saw the McDonald's brothers operation, it was very fast, it was very clean, and it was very consistent and efficient. So where the brothers saw that owned it, the McDonald brothers, where they saw a hamburger stand, Kroc saw something different. See, this is what I'm talking about, being able to see something different. Kroc saw a national company. He saw an opportunity to take what they had done and stamp it out and take this model, this prototype, and build literally not only hundreds, but literally thousands and thousands of these. And so he saw things different than what the actual McDonald brothers saw. So what he did was he got himself involved in selling the franchise. He became their franchise agent in 1955, and then in 1961 he actually bought them out for $2.7 million. So his real genius was the model underneath. It was then McDonald's became really a real estate company as a restaurant company, owning the land under all of its franchisees, and that's what they did. So today they have now over 40,000 golden arches around the world. But the vision was seeing the system, the ability to the system, not necessarily the hamburger products. So that's the difference. And he had that entrepreneurial spirit where he could see something that didn't exist. And that's what I'm talking about today. That's a real entrepreneur. He sees things that others can't see and that doesn't exist. Now, Howard Schultz, many of you know the story on Starbucks. Howard Schultz, he's living in a public housing in Brooklyn, New York. And he joined in 1982, actually, he joined a small Seattle coffee bean retailer called Starbucks. And on a trip to Milan, he watched the Italians treat the espresso bar as a third place, not home, not work, but a community living room. Now he saw this as a place where people go and hang out. And they would go and maybe students would go study and people go do business there. And he just saw this coffee bar as a different place. And he experienced that in Milan. Now his bosses that he was working for, they didn't buy this vision. So Schultz left, started his own coffee bar company. And in 1987, he came back and he bought Starbucks, for $3.8 million. Had 11 stores, and they became more than 35,000 stores now across the globe. So he didn't sell coffee. He was selling a place and a daily ritual. That's the difference. He saw the place. He saw the daily ritual. Now, they would have the coffee. They would drink the coffee while they were there, but that wasn't the number one thing. He sold a place. It's different. And then they had this guy, Jensen Huang, Huang, however you pronounce that, with Navita. In 1993, let me tell you about this guy. Very interesting. Jensen co-founded Navita he was at a Denny's, actually, having dinner. And for years, Navita made graphics chips for video games. It's a good business, not a world-changing one, but a good business. And Jensen made a bet that looked kind of reckless. Starting in 2006, he poured lots of money, like billions, into CUDA, CUDA, right? It's a software that let the gaming chips do the general purpose computing. Okay, Wall Street didn't buy it at the time. They didn't get it. And then the deep learning revolution hit, right? Okay, and it turned out that the hardware, the hardware the entire AI age would run on was that same hardware that he had spent a decade preparing. So Nvidia became one of the most valuable companies on earth, and so he had the vision, okay, planting trees where whose shade you might not sit in for years. So he saw where this was needed, and at the time people didn't understand it and they thought it was crazy, but he was way ahead of the game. It's kind of like when I stepped out and started building Health South and building outpatient centers. People thought I was crazy, because I said, hey, these patients are going to need to move out of these expensive settings, and we can treat them in an outpatient basis, and we can save money. Well, he saw something that others did not see, and so it turned out that he ended up, this was a multi-billion-dollar idea that he had, and turned out to be really great. So again, vision, seeing something that may exist, but exist in a different way, that you could build a system, or seeing those coffee bars that Starbucks, and that more of a place to go, and not a home or a community, but a place to be and hang. And then also the assembly line, and building cars so that everyone, a middle class, had access to it. I mean, Henry Ford was brilliant in what he did. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is, and this is segment 2, is resilience. Resilience, the art of getting back up once you've been knocked down, once you fail. Because, see, in the entrepreneurship space, you're going to fail. People are going to fail. Now, I mean, you don't always fail, but I mean, if you do fail, you got to get back up. And there are a lot of people in the past, they've started a business, it didn't do so well, they failed, they had to get back up, try it again and again, and eventually, they were very successful. And I'm going to give you several of those people. The great ones, that is, they get back up. So I got 4 stories I want to hit you with real quick. Number 1, Walt Disney. So let's take a look at what happened to him. Walt Disney's first studio, Laugh-O-Gram, it went bankrupt in 1923 when he was just 21 years old. He moved to Hollywood with $40 in a suitcase, and he built a hit character that was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Then he lost the rights to his distributor, along with most of his animators, right? And on the train ride home from that disaster, and some of you may have seen this story, he sketched a new character, and that new character was called Mickey Mouse. Steamboat Willie, remember that? Premiered in 1928 when the industry said that a feature-length cartoon would bankrupt him. They called Snow White Disney's Folly. It became the highest grossing film of its time in 1937. Then he bet everything again on that theme park, the first theme park that he built. Nobody wanted, they said, and Disney opened it in 1955. Today, the company he built is worth roughly $200 billion, and every setback that he made became a setup and an opportunity. So again, you get knocked down, you keep coming, you keep trying again, and that's what Walt Disney did. He was an incredible genius and has built an incredibly successful company. Phil Knight, he's another story. Nike, though, Phil Knight's got a great story. He started Blue Ribbon Sports in 1964 with $500 and a handshake with his old track coach, Bill Bowerman. So many of you may know that story. He was importing Japanese running shoes and selling them out of the trunk of his Plymouth. For nearly 20 years, the company lived on the edge of death. Cash crunches, banks pulling credit lines, customs bill that nearly ended everything. And when his Japanese supplier tried to squeeze him out, Knight launched his own brand in 1971, Nike, with a logo. And here's a very interesting story. The swoosh was, he paid a student to design that. He paid him $35 for the swoosh. That's what he paid. Bowerman poured rubber into his wife's waffle iron and invented the modern running shoe. That's interesting. In 1984, they signed a rookie by the name of Michael Jordan, and the rest is history. Today, Nike does roughly $50 billion a year. So Knight titled his memoir Shoe Dog for a reason. Survival was the strategy. I mean, being resilient, no matter what. He had a dream, and he just kept going and going and going until he pushed through. Many of you may know the story of Jack Ma. Jack Ma at Alibaba. Jack Ma failed his college entrance exam twice. He applied for 30 jobs and was rejected by all of them, including he tried to get a job with KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. 24 people applied, and they hired 23. They didn't hire him. He was an English teacher, earning a few dollars a month when he saw the internet for the first time in 1995. And in 1999, he gathered 17 friends in his apartment, and he founded Alibaba. And when eBay entered China, everyone wrote him off, okay? His Taobao marketplace beat them so badly, eBay retreated from the market. And in 2014, Alibaba's New York IPO raised $25 billion. I remember when that happened in 2014. At that time, the largest in history. Rejection, Jack says, was his tuition. So, he just kept coming. They tried to stop him. He couldn't get a job. I mean, he really had a hard time. Couldn't get into college, failed his exam twice, but he didn't stop, and he just kept coming, and he ended up building an incredibly successful organization. Another guy who came across his path a few times in my lifetime, Fred Smith at FedEx. Many of you know the story of Fred. Fred's passed now, but he was certainly well-respected and an incredible, incredible man. Fred Smith wrote the concept for an overnight delivery network in a college paper. He designed this in a college paper, and he launched Federal Express in 1971. And within 2 years, the company was burning cash so fast he couldn't cover a $24,000 fuel bill. So you know what he did? This is an incredible story. Smith famously, he flew to Las Vegas with the company's last $5,000. He won $27,000 at the blackjack tables, flew back home and made payroll. That's an incredible story. It's not a business strategy, however, that I recommend. But the point is, he refused to let the company die. FedEx went on to define the entire industry. FedEx became a verb. Resilience and a brand, right? FedEx it. It's a verb now. Resilience sometimes looks like stubbornness until it works, right? So he continued on. How many times, did he get back up? How many times were he told he wasn't going to make it? And look what he did. And he went out and he had to gamble the last $5,000. Came back with the money, made the payroll, and went on. Of course, we all use FedEx and don't think anything about it. Federal Express, overnight things that have to get there. It's kind of expensive nowadays. It's crazy because the cost of shipping and whatnot. It's just totally out of line. But when it's got to get there, they're one of the best choices. The third thing I want to talk about is calculated risk. Now, a lot of people think that entrepreneurs just really like risk. Well, they don't. Nobody likes to take a big risk, but a calculated risk. In other words, an entrepreneur can figure out, I've got this risk and it's fairly sizable, but look at the upsides over here. Now, what are the chances of this failing? And in his mind, he doesn't see that. He sees where you might see that that's a huge risk because you don't see how he's going to make it happen. He sees how he's going to make it happen. So he minimizes what you might think is a huge risk. To him, it's a small risk because he sees everything that's got to happen to build and grow that company. So he sees it different. So they hate risk and but they understand it better than anyone else. And they take asymmetric bets with survivable downside and an enormous upside. Occasionally, you will see an entrepreneur push all the chips in like Fred did when he went out to Las Vegas and went to the blackjack tables and took the last $5,000 so he could make payroll. But typically, it's a survivable downside with enormous upside, and they are able to see that, and they're able to calculate it. So it's a calculated risk. They're betting big, but they're not going blind. That's important, and understand that. Let me give you an example of a guy that went down that road. Ted Turner, CNN and Turner Broadcasting. Ted Turner inherited his father's billboard business in 1963 after his father's death. And instead of playing it safe, he leveraged it into a failing Atlanta UHF television station in 1970. Many of you may remember that. In 1976, he put that little station on satellite and invented what was called the Superstation. We used to watch late night movies on the Superstation. He carried things that weren't showing on regular TV anymore, and it was a superstation. I remember it well. Then he bet everyone, and then came the big bet, which everyone said was suicidal, and that was when he started the 24-hour news network called CNN. He launched that in 1980, and many of the critics nicknamed it the chicken noodle news. A decade later, during the Gulf War, guess what? CNN was the only network broadcasting live from Baghdad, and the whole world was watching, okay? Turner Broadcasting merged with Time Warner in a 1996 deal, which was worth about $7.5 billion. And Turner risked everything he had multiple times, but always on the thesis that he understood better than any of his critics. And he was successful. He knew what he was doing. So, great story, great story. He's passed on to, he was another real entrepreneur and somebody who it was, everybody knew he's big time, big time. I think many of you may remember the restaurants that he started with the buffalo meat. I actually went to one of those and had it, and it was okay. I don't think they did that great, but I think some of them are still operating. I think I saw one not that long ago. I don't think they're all closed. Now, Elon Musk. You got to throw Elon Musk in here. I mean, you can't get away. Elon Musk may be the purest case study in risk tolerance of our era, okay? After he sold Zip2, many of you may know the story, he sold it for $300 million. He sold and PayPal to eBay for $1.5 billion. Now, he had made enough money. He could retire at 31. He was 31 years old at that time. But he didn't do that. He took his entire fortune, and back then, net to him on all of that, it was about $180 million. So he put all of that money into two companies. Number one, SpaceX, and then that was in 2002, and then Tesla, which he funded, and he did that in 2004. So by 2008, SpaceX had failed 3 of the straight launches, and Tesla was days from bankruptcy. So things were getting hard. Many of you may remember on the news. I mean, Tesla was right up against the wall. It looked like it was going to shut down, go out of business. So he was borrowing money, just to pay rent. And the 4th SpaceX launch succeeded. So NASA then awarded him a $1.6 billion contract. Again, resilience, huh? Calculated risk. He believed he could do it. He kept working at it. He didn't give up. And then Tesla closed financing on Christmas Eve of 2008. Tesla became, guess what? The world's most valuable automaker. SpaceX became the first private company to put humans in orbit. The lesson here isn't bet everything, though. The lesson here is know exactly what you're betting on. And Elon Musk did. He knew what he was betting on. Incredible story, isn't it? Let me give you one more in that segment. Conrad Hilton. Conrad Hilton bought his first hotel, the Mobley in Cisco, Texas, and it was in 1919. He had come to town to buy a bank and bought a hotel instead. When the bank deal fell through, the Depression nearly wiped him out. He lost many of the hotels that he had bought, and he was hundreds of thousands in debt. But while others fled the industry, he stayed. Hilton bought distressed properties during the Depression, and he bought them at Depression prices, which were cheap. And in 1946, Hilton Hotels became the first hotel company listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and he went on to build the first coast-to-coast chain and take American hospitality international. So today, Hilton spans more than 7,000 properties worldwide, and of course, they have been very, very successful, and many of you go to Hilton's and stay, and now they have the Hilton Garden Inn, and I know I'm a member, and I guess I'm whatever diamond or platinum or whatever it is, because I try to stay at those Hilton Garden Inns. I like them. They're very nice hotels. And so Conrad Hilton, he bet big, but he wasn't blind. He saw the opportunity. He saw the long game down the road, what could happen if he was successful. Now, I want to hit you with the fourth trait, segment is salesmanship. This is what I called the transfer of belief. Transfer of belief, okay? And see, nothing happens until somebody sells something, right? Yeah, before you have proof, you only have persuasion with investors, okay? So with your first employees or your first customers. So I'm going to give you 3 different individuals, okay, that built empires on the transfer of belief. So this is a category, transfer of belief. And then I mean, I had to do that when I was building Health South. I had this belief on what the future was going to be in healthcare, and I had to transfer that to investors, to bankers, to employees, to whoever I had, to potential customers, and had to get them to buy into what I was believing, that my belief, and I was successfully doing that. So let's start with Estee Lauder. Estee Lauder, very famous, very famous. Started in the 1930s selling skin creams. Her chemist uncle that he had formulated, demonstrating them on women's hands in beauty salons. She incorporated in 1946, and in 1948 she talked her way onto the counter at Saks Fifth Avenue. That was a big deal, okay? With no advertising budget, she invented the tactic the entire cosmetic industry now lives on. You know what that is? Remember, the free gift. The free gift with the purchase. I mean, I've seen it. Y'all have seen it. Ladies, you know. Her philosophy was simple. Put the product in the customer's hands, and it will sell itself. Youth Dew, D-E-W, her bath oil that doubled as perfume exploded in 1953. Today, the Estee Lauder company owns Clinique, MAC, La Mer, and dozens of brands. They're doing about $15 billion a year. She outsold many of the giants, okay, because she believed in what she was doing and in her product. Incredible. Another one, Mary Kay Ash. We know about Mary Kay Cosmetics. Mary Kay spent 25 years in direct sales. She was watching men who had trained her get promoted over her. And in 1963, and at 45, she retired. Now, she wrote down everything wrong with the company she had worked for. She wrote it all down. And after she wrote it all down, she looked at it and she said, oh, my gosh, this is a business plan. This is a business plan. And so she said, oh, so with $5,000, she launched Mary Kay Cosmetics. Yeah, her genius was making the sales force the product. Think about that. She made the sales force the product. Now, I want you to think about that. Many of you know what I'm talking about. Mary Kay, that sales force became the product. And I can see that right now in the pink Cadillacs and the presentations and going into ladies' homes and having groups. Independent beauty consultants is what they call them, okay, who own their own business. They own those businesses, okay, and they were recognized on stage. They were rewarded with diamonds and pink Cadillacs. She built one of the largest direct-selling cosmetic companies in the world with millions of consultants across dozens and dozens of countries. She proved that culture isn't a poster on the wall. It's not a poster on the wall, folks. Okay, it's a compensation plan with a recognition system. That's right. So all of these ladies had their own businesses, and they were highly motivated. And so it was the sales force and the transfer of belief in what they were selling, and belief that she set it up for these people to be successful. So she had all these entrepreneurs working for her that were out there building their business. And she gave them a way to get there. She structured the environment for them to operate within, and she created the culture. Brilliant what she did. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oprah Winfrey, Harpo Productions and OWN. Remember, OWN. OWN is her own network. Oprah Winfrey was born into poverty in rural Mississippi, okay? And she worked her way up through local television. In 1984, she took over the last place Chicago morning show, okay? Within months, she was able to take it to the number one show, okay? And by 1986, Oprah Winfrey Show was in national syndication. So here's the entrepreneurial move most people miss. She didn't just host the show through Harpo Productions. She owned it. Ownership, not a salary, is what built the fortune. She launched a magazine, a book club that moved millions of copies within a single endorsement, and in 2011, she owned her own cable network, OWN. She became the first black woman billionaire in American history, and her product, what was her product? It was trust. Trust, and nobody ever sold it better than she did. Incredible. Wow. Transfer of belief. Okay, moving on. Got a little bit more time. Number 5, resourcefulness. Doing more with less. This is the entrepreneur. Doing more with less. Resourcefulness. See, capital is never the real constraint. I mean, it's a constraint, but it's never the real constraint. Creativity is the ability to create and to be able to do the things that the entrepreneur has to do in terms of being able to see the product, being able to know what he's got to do with the product or with the business. Okay, so some of the greatest companies in history started with less money than most people would spend on a used car. True story. And I'm going to give you some of those. Berry Gordy, take him for example. He was an entrepreneur. Many of you remember Motown Records. In 1959, I remember Berry Gordy well because this was my era growing up in the 60s. I love the 60s music. In 1959, Berry Gordy borrowed $800 from his family savings fund. And he founded Motown in a small house in Detroit, and he named it Hitsville, USA. He ran it like the auto plants that he had worked in. An assembly line for this, songwriters, house band, choreography and development, quality control meetings where records were voted on before they were ever released. Out of that little house came the Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson, The Temptations, the Jackson 5. So Motown became the most successful independent record label in history, and for years, the largest black-owned business in America. He sold it in 1988 for $61 million. $800 properly aimed changed the American culture. Berry Gordy, what a story. He was incredible. And what did he see? He saw things that others had not seen. He created just out of a little house. Motown Records became the most successful independent record label in the history of the United States of America. Okay, that's Berry Gordy. He did that. Incredible. Jackson 5, man, some of the greatest. Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, the Supremes, Smokey Robinson, and, of course, the Temptations. Many of those folks came up out of Alabama, didn't they? Sure did. Okay, moving on. Next, Sarah Blakely. What did Sarah Blakely do? Spanx. Okay, Sarah Blakely was selling fax machines door to door, and she cut the feet off of a pair of pantyhose to wear under white pants. With $5,000 in savings, she researched patents at the library and wrote her own patent to save on legal fees. She cold called hosiery mills in North Carolina, and one owner's daughter convinced him to take a chance on her. And she talked her way into Neiman Marcus meeting by demonstrating the product in the ladies' room. In 2000, Oprah Winfrey named spandex a favorite thing, and the company ignited. Blakely took no outside investment for 21 years. And when Blackstone, their huge buyout fund, Blackstone bought a majority stake in 2021. It valued Spanx at $1.2 billion, and she owned essentially all of it. So resourcefulness is a substitute for capital, right? Capital is never necessarily a substitute for the resourcefulness. She did more with less, and she ended up building a very successful business. Okay, let's hit this one here. Sam Walton at Walmart, okay? Got to know about Sam Walton. Sam Walton opened the first Walmart in Rogers, Arkansas in 1962, the same year Kmart and Target launched, backed by giant parent companies. Walton had a franchise dime store and a pickup truck. And his edge was obsessive frugally. I mean, he didn't spend anything. If y'all remember, matter of fact, he drove the same old pickup truck, and he flew a little Bonanza. I think it might have been an A-36 or a C-35 something, but it was a small airplane. Took his dog with him as he traveled. Okay, so he was stealing good ideas from everyone. He would walk the competitor stores, okay, with a notebook. He flew his own little plane around his little Bonanza around to scout the locations, and he passed every penny that he saved on to the customer. He put big discount stores in small towns and everyone else was ignoring those cities. He built a logistics and a distribution system decades ahead of the industry, which is why he has been so successful, and they continue to be successful. And he drove costs down relentlessly. So today, Walmart is the largest company on earth by revenue, more than $650 billion a year, over 2 million employees. The man drove the same old pickup truck to the very end. Now, I talked about Warren Buffett talking about companies that were going to continue to survive. Walmart's one of them, and it has to do with, his logistics and how he his distribution system is so cost effective. Nobody, and now he's delivering to home. So you can call Walmart, they'll bring you groceries. And man, I'm seeing 2-hour delivery now from the time you order things. This is incredible. So Amazon and Walmart, doing extremely well. Okay. This is going to be our last one, segment 6. Okay, this is contrarian thinking and adaptability. Now, this is one of the things I talked about in the past, being able to adapt, being and thinking different, contrarian. You think, well, you hear stuff coming out of a real entrepreneur, you think, well, maybe he's crazy, right? But the reality of it is he sees things that other people are very comfortable in their shoes, and this guy, he's not. He sees things that other people don't see, and he steps out of those shoes. He steps into a different world and sees things different. And in doing that, and sometimes they do things that might even be detrimental to their own business. And I'm going to talk about that because this is very interesting. I got a couple of things I want to hit here that I think you're going to like. Very interesting. But let's start with Southwest Airlines. Herb Keller. Herb co-founded Southwest Airlines in 1967. I remember it well. And spent 4 years fighting competitor lawsuits before the first flight ever took off in 1971. His strategy inverted the entire industry. No hubs, point-to-point routes, one type of aircraft. He flew only the Boeing 737s, and that way he was able to slash maintenance and training costs. He had 10-minute gate turnarounds. I'll never forget that. No assigned seats, and culture that put employees first on the theory that happy employees make happy customers. And the industry laughed. Southwest then posted 47 consecutive profitable years in a business where bankruptcy has been the tradition. And so Keller proved that his strategy, is choosing what not to do. He didn't want to be like the others. And many of you may remember hot pants. He had, had all the flight attendants wear hot pants, red hot pants, and boots. And I remember because back when I was first working for Lifemark Corporation, we had hospitals down in the valley and around the country, and I'd fly Southwest out of Houston because I was living in Houston. Their headquarters was there, and I would go to get on, and they would give you it was a plastic pass, and it would be like different colors and whatnot, as to where you sat. Sections and whatnot. But anyways, you just go in there and get a seat. And they even had, if some of you may remember, the seats that faced each other. So you could be flying backwards, and that was kind of a cool thing. But if you were with a group and they had 3 here and 3 there facing each other, and you had 4, 5, 6 people with you could all sit in one section, and you could do business the whole time that you were flying. So it was kind of neat. But I remember them giving me the card, and I remember getting to the airport just, like 30 minutes, 20 minutes before my flight, and parking and then just running on, grabbing my card, and because it didn't matter, and just lining up and getting on that plane. And I also remember flying, I would fly down to the valley from Houston, and it was like $15, and I'd leave out at like 10 at night and then come back the next night at like, late at night, and just get those late flights. And it was very, very inexpensive. And they was just like cattle. We'd load up on that plane, and it'd pack it out, and it'd take off, and, turn around and be ready to go. I mean, it was incredible. It was a good plan, and it works very, very, very well for a long period of time. Now, Reed Hastings. Let's talk about Netflix real quick. I'm running out of time here. I've got to move on. He co-founded Netflix in 1997. Now, originally it was a DVD by mail service. In 2000, he flew to Dallas and offered to sell Netflix to Blockbusters. Get this, y'all, for $50 million. Remember Blockbuster? They were a big store. They were on every corner. Anyways, Blockbuster said no. They passed on it. They laughed at him, laughed him out of the room. And the real lesson came later in 2007 when the DVD business still growing and profitable. Hastings launched a streaming business, deliberately cannibalizing his own core product, the DVD business. When he started with the streaming, then people would not be buying the DVD. But that was going to ultimately, and it ultimately did, put Blockbuster out of business, right? So he cannibalized his own core product before someone else could have done it to him. So he started that streaming business. And in 2013, he bet again, spending $100 million on a house of cards, and where he moved from distributor to studio. Netflix now has around 300 million subscribers, and Blockbuster has 1 store left, okay? So, adapt or die isn't a slogan, but it is a schedule. It can happen. If you don't make the changes, you can go out of business. And You have to make the changes, and that's so important. It's just like back in the day when I saw surgery was going out of the hospital. It was going to be in freestanding surgery centers. It had to make the changes because we were able to run it so much cheaper and so much more efficient in outpatient setting because so many different procedures now, surgical techniques were advancing to the point that you didn't need to do it in a hospital, and patients didn't stay overnight, and there's no reason to put them into an expensive hospital. So what we did was we had the freestanding facilities, and the doctor could drive right up to the front door, get out, go in, do the surgery. He didn't have to park in a parking deck and walk a long ways. He didn't have to wait in line for his time. We set it up so we turned the rooms in 10 to 15 minutes so the doctors would be able to go in and do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 surgeries in a morning, see patients all afternoon, and be home for dinner with their wives. And we were focused on being able to do that, and we built a business on that concept. Next, I got to hit you with a couple more before I get out of here and we shut down for today, and then we'll pick up the rest tomorrow or the next show. Michael Dell, 1984, Michael Dell, Dell Technologies. He was 19 years old. He was a pre-med student at the University of Texas, building computers in his dorm room with $1,000. His contrarian insight: skip the retail middleman entirely, sell direct to the consumer, build each machine to order, carry almost no inventory, and get paid before you build it. Dell went public in 1988. Michael became the youngest CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And when the PC business matured, he adapted again, taking the company private in 2013 for nearly $25 billion, then acquiring EMC for $67 billion, at the time the largest technology deal in history to transform Dell into an enterprise infrastructure giant. Michael Dell, he was right on time with what he was doing, and he was a contrarian. He saw the opportunity. Warren Buffett, let's hit this real quick. Berkshire Hathaway, we got to talk about Warren. Warren Buffett, by the way, I was at the baseball games, the World Series, College World Series. I drove by and saw his house. I've heard so much about it, so I went by and saw it. And it's not quite what they said. It's better than what they make a story like it's this horrible little home that he grew up in. He's had for, 75 years. Well, it's a beautiful home, so it's not quite what they're saying. But for the amount of money he has, I guess he could have had something 100 times that size. Warren Buffett bought his first stock at 11, filed his first tax return at 13. He started the Buffett Partnership in 1956 with money from the family and friends, and in 1965 he took control of a dying New England textile mill called Berkshire Hathaway. That's where he got the name, which he later called his worst trade ever, and then he turned it into the greatest compounding machine in financial history. His contrarian greed, you know how he is. Be fearful when others are greedy, he says, and greedy when others are fearful. Interesting. Insurance float funded acquisitions, and patience did the rest. Roughly 20% annual returns compounded over almost 60 years, building Berkshire toward $1 trillion valuation. Buffett proves that temperament, not IQ, is the entrepreneur's edge. Very, very important. I've had dinner with Warren Buffett twice in Washington, D.C., and I'll tell you more about those dinners on our next show. So you want to stay tuned. I'll tell you what he told me. I sat right next to him. We were in a very famous and well-known senator's condominium, and where you could look out the window and see the Washington Monument. I was up there on business. I was invited to have dinner with him, and we had a great time. And then he came back, had dinner again, same place, same time. And I was with Warren Buffett on the day that Forbes magazine put him out as the wealthiest man in the world. And I walked out of that dinner with him that night, and we went, and I'm going to tell the story about, and I'm not going to tell it today. I'm going to tell the story about what happened with he and I and the time we spent together. And what went down that night. We had a great time together. So anyways, if you want to hear the story of my time with Warren Buffett, I'm going to talk about it on the next show. I'm also going to get into several other things. I'm going to talk about long-term thinking. I want to talk about brand, identity, and reinvention. And I'm going to talk about closing with a full stack. And you don't want to miss that. Next time. Scrushy on Business. I'm Richard Scrushy. I hope you have a great day. Don't forget our sponsor is Brothers Multipurpose Cleaner and Degreaser. You can go to our website. You can go to their website, which is brotherscleaner.com, and you can buy the product. They are selling 3. You get 1 free, so you end up with 4. And if you want to just buy 1, you can, but I promise you if you use this, you'll keep using it. It's a great product. So, again, you don't want to miss the show next week. We got a great show planned for you. We're going to get us some really good stuff. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We appreciate you, and you have a blessed day.